Well, again, thank you and welcome. This is the presentation of our brand and marketing study that we started in 2019. A lot of folks think that branding is PR. It's not. Basically, branding is looking into finding out what your identity is and using that to understand how you create a strategic plan, a strategy behind it. And your identity is truly, all of us have our own identity. Each one of you in this room has an identity. Is what people think about you and talk about you when you're not in the room. Reston Association has the same thing. And I wasn't sure what that identity was, nor was the board. We kept getting information from individuals, which was opinion, but we didn't have data. And so to make decisions, you need to have data, and you need to put that all together into a strategy. And one of the things that we needed to do that was indeed to have a brand and marketing study, which the board agreed to. I think, and we got started in May, I think it was. That study involved talking to a whole host, literally all the board members, 1,600 individuals. You're going to see all the statistics up here. And what it's given us is a really clear understanding of what we are doing well, what we're not doing so well, what the community likes that we do, and also what the community would like us to start doing. So with that, I'm going to introduce our team from the Brand Consultancy, and the CEO is Diane Beecher. She's the CEO and Chief Senior Strategist, and Jennifer Layton, who is the Chief Research Officer. Their presentation is set to go for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we have a half hour for questions and answers. So with that, Diane.
Hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a little bit of knowledge about us so you understand where we're coming from, the perspective we have when we share the data and the insights and the resulting strategy with you. We're going to align on brands. So Hank did a great job of talking about it as identity. We look at it in a similar way. So we'll just ensure that we're all talking about it and thinking about it in the same way, so we have a common language today. We will go through our methodology and share with you the rigor that went behind all of the insights, the results, and the strategy. We will then do a high-level review of the research. There's a lot more than we're sharing with you tonight. We didn't want to keep you here forever, so we'll give you a high-level summary that will tell you a story about, as Hank said, what are we known for? What does the marketplace think we stand for? What do they think we're good at? What do they think we need to do perhaps in the future to drive further engagement with them, to drive further satisfaction? And then we will look at what we did with that research and pulling it into a brand platform. So what do we stand for? What is grounded today in the reality of who we are, but what is also aspirational, so we have something to shoot for with our strategic plan in the future. And then we'll talk about the brand platform, how that leads to bringing it to life. If it's just words on a page at the end of the day, and they stay words on a page or a screen, then none of us have done our jobs correctly. We have to ensure that we bring them to life in the right way so they can have the results that we want them to have. So just real quickly, a little bit about us. So this is our 31st year in business, so we've been doing this over and over and over again. I founded the company with a partner who is still my partner, and we grew to be rather large, and what we realized is that we had a lot of junior folks who were doing work, very strategic work, with leadership teams, with boards, et cetera. And so we changed our business model about 21 years ago, and we are an all senior team. So everybody who works with us has at least 20 years of experience, so we can bring the best practice learnings to the table for our clients. And this experience allows us to ensure that we move quickly and with precision, and we drive measurable outcomes. There are 4 pillars that define our brand. You'll see the 4 pillars that define the Reston Association brand based on our research and insights and such. This is what defines us, our identity, okay, is rigor and speed. So the research that we do that Jen will go over with you in a few minutes is really rigorous. It's statistically accurate, it's very sound, it's very stable, and boards and leadership teams can feel confident making decisions based on this data, okay? But we do it really quickly because there's a lot of dynamic environment, a lot of dynamic tension in the environment, and we need to do it quickly and capture a snapshot of what's going on in the marketplace. We've got, as I said, 30 years of experience, but we don't rest on our laurels, so we ensure that we're always on the leading edge of technology, ideas, and insights. This is probably the most important slide about us in here, and it's not brand strategy to create a brand strategy. Why? It's in service of achieving a mission, of advancing your strategic plan and your goals. So it's really important that those two things are tied together. And lastly, it's about the results of our work, but it's also about the process going through it. And we want everyone to feel confident, to feel comfortable, and to know that it's a credible methodology that has driven results for many, many organizations over time. This is not 30 years worth of clients, but this is a snapshot across industries. You'll see some associations, you'll see some real estate, you'll see some well-known brands, you'll see some brands you don't know. That's intentional. We use the same methodology for all of our clients and have for the past 30 years. And so this is just a snapshot of some of the folks we've worked with. And you might recognize some of these. These are real estate and development clients, many of them local. We are in DC, we are a national company, but we are headquartered here. And so we've got a lot of experience there as well. So let's talk about a definition of brand.
Okay, so as Diane said, let's make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how we're thinking about a brand and how we're talking about a brand. Hank said it's more than just our name. It's more than just what we do. It is our reputation in the market. And in fact, you might have stolen the slide from me. You didn't know it. Our definition of brand is reputation, almost exactly to what Hank said. And really, Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, said it best. Your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. It's what you leave behind. It is absolutely your reputation. And what your reputation does, it's more than what you look like. It's more than a logo. It's more than an ad. It's more than marketing or PR. It's what you say about yourselves, but more importantly, it's what others say about you. Again, it's what they say about you when you leave the room. It's their expectations about engaging with you before they do, and the sum of the experiences they have with your people, with your products, with your services, everything that represents the association, okay? Every single touch point matters for your reputation. So whether it's from getting a pool pass, to using the lake house, to walking the trails, to the board meetings, how the phone's answered, ease of finding information on your website, we have to, again, as part of building our reputation and really putting that stake in the ground for who we are as an association, we have to ensure a consistent positive experience at every single touch point, as it's critical for us to, again, to build and to maintain a positive reputation with those we serve today and those who we want to serve in the future, okay? So ultimately, you can proactively manage your brand by ensuring everything you say and everything you do is aligned with the reputation you want to build. So that's the foundation of going into everything we'll go through today. Let me take you through a few brands really quickly. So the first one is Apple. A lot of people say Apple is, it's all about phones, right? That's what we know it for. But really, Apple's more than just the phone sitting in your bag. It's more than the computer you may or may not use. It's the Genius Bar. It's the invention of iTunes and streaming music and all of those components. Apple, at the end of the day, actually stands for intuitive. So if I asked you guys, what does Volvo stand for? Somebody want to throw it? Safety. Apple is intuitive because everything they do is guided around, is it intuitive enough for the user to use? So it's not fancy technology, it's not all of that, it is intuitiveness. If we take Starbucks, initially everybody says Starbucks is about expensive coffee, right? Kind of age-old joke about Starbucks, but really what Starbucks is about is human connections. They've created their entire brand as an experience. So from walking into their stores, from the products they offer, from the people you engage with, from the decor, their advertising, everything they say and do is wrapped around how do they continue to facilitate human connections. Even when they get bad PR, for that gentleman in the restroom, it brought it back to, this is about human connections, we are going to let anybody use the restroom. So again, it's everything you say and everything you do. So what's Reston Association's reputation? That's what we set out to find. We want to understand what is it from a multitude of perspectives. So we have a very diverse community here of age, of gender, of ethnicity, of race, of income, etc. So we wanted to understand, make sure we get a representative sample to figure out what is our reputation in the market today across our entire member base. Okay. So real quickly, Diane will take you through the process and then we'll dig into the research.
Okay, so just at a snapshot level, what we're going to show you was the result of several months of work with a steering team that included board members and included leadership and management staff and our team. And first we looked at the market landscape. And so, you know Reston. I've lived here, I was born here. We know Reston well, but there's nothing like looking at it again. And so we looked at it, we looked at your sister organizations, we looked at folks what might be deemed competitive organizations. We looked at Reston Association and how the association is representing itself in the marketplace. So we wanted to get a market landscape view. We pulled together the steering team I talked to, and we did some SWOT analysis with them. We said, where do we think we're strong? What do we think our reputation is in different pockets? What do we think we're doing that is serving our constituents well? What could we do in the future? What are our hypotheticals about what we could do to drive engagement, to drive satisfaction, to drive new member acquisition, to drive non-assessment dues revenue so that we have the funds to do more things to satisfy our members and such. So we pulled together that cross-functional steering team, did that work with them. We also interviewed most of the board members and had in-depth conversations to get their perspectives on these things. They're critical as well. And then we did rigorous quantitative research with the marketplace, with the staff, and we'll show you what that looks like and who we talk to. We then created the brand platform. We'll show you. We created the messaging that supports that, so we all speak with one voice. Critical that everybody who speaks about Reston Association does so in a consistent way. Okay, so we build that reputation we want. We created a strategic roadmap. That's part of bringing it to life. So it's what are we doing well that we want to leverage and keep doing well? Where is there opportunity for growth? Where is there opportunity to do new things? And how do we prioritize those things using the least amount of resource to get the greatest impact? We created that strategic roadmap, and we are working on now a customer experience. And when I say customer, I mean our members, but the community as a whole is our customer base. And so what is that experience they want us to have with them? What are those service standard elements that we want to put in place that will foster a positive reputation? So at the end of the day, we wanted to answer the questions, what's our current reputation today from a fact-based perspective? What should it be in the future? What services and programs matter most? Are there things that we're doing that we're putting resources against that just don't matter to the community? And are they things that we want that we're not doing? What should our brand promise? What should we start doing, keep doing, stop doing to ensure that we meet stakeholder needs and drive non-assessment revenue? So that in a snapshot is what we did and the questions we wanted to answer. And now Jen will take us through the research.
Okay. All right, so really quickly, the background in terms of who we spoke with or who we interviewed for the research. So Diane mentioned we talked with 8 of the board members. Thank you guys for an hour of their time really to kind of get under the hood, to understand their perspective and what's working, what's not, and where the association can go in the future. We also interviewed via an online survey about 1,600 folks. The vast majority were members, so about 1,200, a little bit more were members. However, we also heard from non-members living in Reston. We also heard from non-Reston residents, who visit Reston, so they visit Reston regularly for dinner, for shopping, something like that. And then non-Reston residents who work in Reston. So we wanted to make sure we understood perspectives from these different groups. We also interviewed internal and external Reston Association stakeholders. So these were employees, these were Fairfax County employees, a good cross-section of different stakeholders in the community that aren't necessarily considered members or non-members. Okay? All right, so there were a lot of discussions early on about, we have a diverse community. How do we make sure we reach everybody? And an online survey, especially one that was posted in Reston Now, really generated a ton of engagement and a ton of feedback. And we have a very good cross-section of the community. We have a very good mix of age groups. So again, we hit all three of the major generations. A good mix of ethnicity, of gender, of course, and then of household income and education. One thing to notice is Reston, and you may or may not know, is a highly educated community. So when we look at these numbers and we see this data come in, we have to go to census data to say, okay, is this really representative? Because our job, or my job, is to make sure that the data I'm reporting to you guys is representative of the community. And there is a high level of education in Reston, incredibly high compared to most communities across the US. We also have a mix of those who have children and don't. So about 36% of the community have children under the age of 18. And so, when we look at information like this, it's also, we have conversations with Mike and the steering team and Hank of, you guys have summer camps. And you've got only 36% of your residents with children. So how do we talk about bringing in non-residents or non-members into the community? Because 36% of different age groups may not be enough to fulfill your summer camp spaces. So this data is obviously to look to make sure the sample is balanced, but it's also to help us start to make bigger decisions. Okay? Finally, again, good percentage, good mix of those different home values, a good mix of folks who have lived here for different lengths of time, so different tenure within Reston. We have 28%, also about a quarter who've been here over 20 years. However, we also have about a quarter who've only been here 1 to 5 years, and then a good mix in between. So again, good representation of those who are new to the area versus those who have been here quite a while. Okay, so all that to lead into very good sample, very good cross-section of the community. I hope many of you took the survey, so you have an idea of kind of what that experience was like. As we dove into it, we said, what is your overall opinion of Reston Association today? The green, so one thing is you'll see a lot of color coding. Keep in mind a stoplight. So green is good, pink is bad, yellow's in the middle, okay? Dark green is really good. So on the top 2 box perspective, so this is on a 5-point scale, we said, what's your overall opinion of Reston Association? Nearly 3/4 of our members give us excellent or good. This is incredibly high. This is 73%. We have only 13% who give us not very good or poor. The rest is kind of stuck in the middle. Incredibly high overall opinion of the association, okay? And what's even more interesting is when we said, okay, here's your overall opinion. What's your overall value perception for your Reston Association membership? Incredibly high. We only dropped 4 percentage points. We went from 73 to 67%. This is huge. And the reason this is huge is anybody can have a good opinion. Once you add the word price or value on it, it will always drop. It barely dropped. So it went from 73 to 67%. This is, again, an incredibly high number. When we look at these numbers, they're also incredibly low for the poor value perception, that pink. We look at how do we move that 16% into that 67% range. So how do we increase that 67% by moving those that are in the middle? You always have folks that are on the negative end, and sometimes those are harder to move. So what we look at is, let's look at how we move those in the middle, and that's what you'll see throughout today as well. Okay? So very, very good news in all of my 25 years of research experience and all of the research I've done, thousands and thousands of studies, these are very, very high numbers. Okay? All right, so after that we dug into are they aware of what we offer? And if they are, how satisfied are they with our different amenities and services? So this is just an awareness chart. So again, this is members, where we said, which of the following services and amenities does Reston Association currently provide, okay? You see very high awareness of what you would expect. Your swimming pools, your paved hiking trails and pathways, tennis courts, et cetera, Walker Nature Center, Education Center. So very good awareness there. It really does tier way down to some of these other smaller services and amenities. The bars that you see are pink, are those what we don't currently offer. But we wanted to see, is there any level of confusion? So there were a lot of questions around the community center. Do they think it's us? Or do they realize it's Reston Community Center? 55% of people think it's us. Which again is a challenge when you have a brand, because your brand is the sum of everything you say and you do, and if they think the community center is something we do, that also impacts our reputation. So this is the kind of learning that, that will continue to move forward with Hank and the management team on how do we start using this information additionally. Okay? All right, we said, okay, are you aware? If you're aware, have you used any of these facilities or services? If you have, how satisfied are you with them? This right here is one of the reasons there's incredibly high satisfaction with Reston Association. These are very high satisfaction numbers for each of these amenities and services. The highest being among the paved hiking trails and pathways, all the way down to the lowest two, the summer camp programs and the covenants and standards for design, maintenance, and ease of, use of property, sorry. So what we found with, and you're gonna see how covenants comes in, very few people use the covenants, really. You know, if you think about who does work and who doesn't necessarily on the properties, but you'll see kind of how that plays out in the big picture as we go through the data.
Shannon, quick question. Is this a slide and the previous slide only among Reston residents? Is that's what that notation at the bottom is?
Yep. We asked non-Reston residents the same thing, but for today, we just really wanted to focus on Reston, but we have this data for all the other groups. Okay. After digging into what we do today, we said, all right, what would you want us to do? What services and amenities would you want us to consider offering? And I don't expect you guys to read this. This is to show you, we put forward, I don't know, my gosh, probably about 50 different ideas. And a lot of it was brainstorming internally. It was board member brainstorming. It was looking to see what else was out there in other communities across the US, pulling together potential ideas that we could pursue as an association. And this chart just simply shows you the blue line is how interested residents were. Non-residents are orange, and that sort of yellow line are those non-residents who work in Reston. Very similar patterns. You see the most interest is in having an annual sort of Celebrate Reston event around the lake. Tears down to state-of-the-art gym or fitness center, but all of these were pretty high interest levels. If I move on to other slides, we start to see it decrease. So we see a lot of interest here in a wellness center. If you go all the way down to the bottom here, an outdoor interactive fountain and splash park. Very interested for those who work in Reston, but not necessarily for the current residents. So this is why we look at the data this way, is that when we look at our strategic objectives as an association, we need to understand if we're trying to attract people who work in Reston, let's talk about, is that something we consider moving forward with or not? Again, all of those become strategic business conversations. And then finally, those with the lowest interest. So from here, sailing program for adults or youth, again, generally lower across the board. We also see here all year weatherproof indoor tennis courts. When we came up to the engagement, that was one of the hypotheses that folks had is, hey, we need to pull indoor tennis courts. We're seeing that actually very low in the pecking order. There were a lot of other ideas that rose to the top in terms of generating interest and potential non-assessment engagement. Okay. This is the overlap again. I don't expect you to be able to read it, just to show you. There are several amenities and services that we should be considering that would hit all three of these different groups. So Reston residents, non-residents, and those who work in Reston. So all of these top 7 ideas, all three groups are interested in. So as we start to prioritize, what do we do going forward for the future of Reston and Reston Association, we would focus primarily in those top 7. However, if there are strategic initiatives about attracting different groups, we would start to move down in that pecking order. Okay. All right. So this is the heft of what builds the brand platform. I'm going to go through it quickly. It's a lot of data, but these are value drivers. So why do we talk about value drivers? Value drivers help us define how Reston members basically evaluate Reston Association. So what it allows us to do is determine how important, to learn what matters most in driving the value perception of Reston Association and overall engagement with us. It helps us really kind of pull together the foundation in which we want to build the brand. Okay, so you're going to see those pull forward. So what we do is we have, if you took the survey, you rated Reston Association on several attributes. We take that data, we empirically look at it and say, okay, there's all of these statements on here. How are they correlating together? And are there sort of bigger ideas that we can capture in this data? These are what we call factors. So all of these statements here, there's 9 statements there. All of those, based on how people rated Reston Association, all correlate very, very highly together. So we say, okay, there's a single idea in there that all of these are laddering up to. So we look at all of them and we say, what does this mean? All of these statements, their staff is helpful, their staff makes an effort to help you with what you need, they resolve problems well, etc., all ladder up to what we think is called service excellence. So again, you didn't see the word service excellence, but that's how we interpreted how those statements fell together. There's another bucket around the variety of high quality amenities, a bucket around community care, preserve design and value, and then making Reston a better place to live. Okay, so I'll show you how this falls in terms of value drivers. After we group them into these factors, we say, okay, well, how impactful? So if we were to influence our perception of making Reston a better place to live, what kind of impact would that have on our members' satisfaction with us? This all adds up to 100%, so this tells us of the overall rating of Reston Association, 29% of the rating somebody gives us is based on variety of high quality amenities. If you look at the next one, 21% is based on making Reston a better place to live, etc. So this is relative importance of how each of these different factors might influence the reputation of Reston Association. Okay, so really quickly, so we not only look at how important each of those bigger factors are, but also all the individual statements. Okay, well, great, it's wonderful that variety of high quality amenities is important, but what specifically within that is most important? So these are the top 5 statements or attributes that contribute to our reputation. Really being the first 2 makes sense. Services and amenities are well priced, that's price, right? Second one, they provide high quality services and amenities, that's the exact definition of value. So that makes sense, those 2 sit on top. However, you start to move down and we see some emotional things like they make you proud to live in Reston. It's incredibly important that we deliver on that. That we're a premier service provider, help make Reston a better place to live, etc. Also, a few more around amenities and services. This is sort of that second tier in importance, okay? They ensure Reston looks good, they're easy to work with, so there's some service components that start to come into play here. The amenities are well-maintained, also comes into play. What's interesting when we do things like this is what's not important. And because this is relative, sometimes it's hard for folks to really understand, what do you mean it's not important? So on here, we have These are the least important value drivers. They appropriately enforce design covenants and maintenance standards. They balance community development with environmental impact. They enable Reston to be a biophilic community. Their staff treats you with respect, they clearly communicate, and they always have someone readily available to speak to whenever needed. So when we're looking at the pecking order of what we prioritize, from an association perspective, it's not that we're not going to do this stuff. We're just not going to prioritize. We're going to prioritize what we do and what we improve based on those drivers that are most important. Okay, so probably what you guys have been waiting for is what's our reputation on these. So now we know what's most important. We know what amenities folks want, but how are we actually doing on what's most important? So we look at this in a 2x2 quadrant. We say, all right, if something is incredibly important and we perform very well on it, we call that a primary strength. That's saying, hey, keep up the good work. You're doing well on something that's very important. On the flip side, if something's very important and we're not doing well, we call it a primary weakness. That is something you've got to concentrate on, and that's a weakness and a gap you have to close. Then we have the bottom two. We call these secondary strengths and weaknesses. So we're either performing well or poorly on something that's just not that important. So oftentimes we'll say, these are lower priority overall. Really, let's focus on those top two. Okay? So again, remember the colors. Green is good, yellow's in the middle, and pink is not. So of these big factors, we'll get into the individual statements in a second. Of these big factors, we have importance again, just like that quadrant I just showed you, and performance or reputation. Our primary strengths as an association, variety of high quality amenities, and making Reston a better place to live. Our primary weakness is community care. And then we have two secondary weaknesses, service excellence and preserve design and value. Excuse me. I'll show you how that breaks down. All right, so these are our primary strengths, incredibly important, and we do very well on them. So this box here is importance, that column, and then performance is our rating on each of those. So where we do highest, help make Reston a better place to live, phenomenal score. Ensure Reston looks good. Offer a variety of services and amenities that suit people of any age, okay? And then amenities being well-maintained. The rest are really strong as well, but those are the incredibly high performance numbers, but everything else is incredibly high as well, okay? Now for the primary weaknesses. So again, these are things that are very important, but we don't do as well on. So first, services and amenities are well priced. So are we terrible in the pink? No. But we are in the yellow, so we would say we know that's really important, but yet we're not getting, we're not earning a reputation for it. We also see some weaknesses in terms of offering unique services and amenities. Being easy to work with, and being easy to work with is an interesting statement, and we put it across almost all categories, all different company types or organization types, and really what easy to work with encompasses is not just the people. There's processes, there's your website, there's your, pull hours, there's all kinds of things that go into that one statement. It's a very important one for us to consider because it's pink and it's really important. And so it's really figuring out how do we close that gap and really increase our reputation for being easier to work with. We also see additional service ones or staff resolves problems well, and they're incredibly responsive when a service or amenity needs attention. You're going to see what we did with some of these in a few minutes. Okay. Then we have secondary strengths and secondary weaknesses. I won't go into detail on those.
And a real quick question. That series of slides, are those the responses of all 1,600 or only?
Just our members.
Just members?
Yeah, so about 1,200, I think it was. Yeah. So they should be, conceivably, they should be intimately involved with us, but it depends on their level of engagement and how often they actually do interact with us, but they are members in that they pay an assessment fee. Okay, so all of this serves, as I mentioned when we talked about value drivers, everything obviously up to that point, but also the value drivers really serve as that foundation for the brand platform in terms of what do we want our reputation to be in the market, based on what's most important as well as what our reputation is today. And so Diane's going to walk you through that.
And just so you all know, this is a fraction of the data that we have, and so there's a lot of insight and learning. You asked about, is this just residents, is this just members, et cetera. We have sliced and diced it every way, and so the leadership team has a lot of information that you're not seeing to work with when they're making decisions, okay? So we're giving you a high-level view of that. So as Jen said, now what are we gonna do with those insights? What do we want our brand to stand for? Our reputation, okay? So this is the way we look at the hierarchy of a brand. So you all have a vision. We look at vision as your purpose. We look at mission is how will we achieve our vision. We have core values. What are the fundamental beliefs that guide our actions? We have a brand essence. What is our ideal reputation? So that's Volvo's safety, that's Apple's intuitive, etc. We have a brand positioning. What do we want to stand for that sets us apart from others and gets people to want to choose us? We have brand pillars.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
What do we want to stand? What's this apart from what's our competition?
So it would be anything that if there are other pools in the area, if there are other amenities that they could choose instead of ours. So there are organizations in the area who are sister organizations to us, and we play nicely with them. And there are anything that's an amenity or a service or something that we offer that they can choose somebody else instead of us. Fair? Okay. And then our brand pillars, what are our key differentiators that are filters for decision making? And these really, when adopted, they should be our filters for decision making. So if we want to earn that reputation, which I'll show you in a minute, that we do want to earn, it comes directly from the research, then we have to make sure we're making decisions on a daily basis.
I may have missed this, but can you please go back? The 1,200 RA members, were they volunteers who took it, or did you mail these to certain random addresses?
Yeah, it was an online survey, and we sent it out to everyone, and they voluntarily took the survey. So we did not hand select them.
And nobody was incentivized or anything like that.
And it was online and made available how and through what publicity?
It was through direct email. It was posted.
So for direct email, you had to be on the RA.
That was
I
the.
will receive.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, and then it was also, the link was also posted on Reston Now, where we got a ton of responses from there as well. And they can't take multiple surveys by one person because his IP address, so all that, so we controlled for all of that when, that's what you worry about when there's a link posted. So it came from a mix of those sources.
Okay? All right.
Diane.
On competition. So of course we don't want people using other people's amenities outside of school. Is that saying you want to bring more people from other communities to be using the amenities here?
That's not what it said, okay?
Just
So that's not what it's saying right now, okay? So we're just looking at competition as any other service or amenity that they can choose, okay? So it's not rendering an opinion on bringing folks in, not bringing folks in. It's just anything else that they can use, okay? All right, so remember Starbucks was about human connections, right? And so let's look at, just as an example, their brand heart, so we can see what blanks will be filling in for us, right? So Starbucks' vision is to be the premier purveyor of the finest coffee in the world while maintaining uncompromising principles, okay? So that is their purpose. How are they going to achieve their purpose? They inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. They've got their core values of culture, actions, and performance. Remember, we said what's the one thing they stand for? That ideal reputation was human connections. They've got a positioning statement, so much more than what we brew. We are a neighborhood gathering place. So you can see, is the coffee important? Of course the coffee's important. They couldn't have bad coffee, but it's so much more than that, okay? It's the reputation they want to own. And they have 3 pillars of customer service, unique products, and environment. So let's look at Reston Association's brand platform. So The vision, the mission, and the core values we did not touch. Those were off the table. Those are the vision, mission, and values that have been around for a while. So we focused on the essence, the positioning, the pillars, and used the data to inform the decision making. We say we go from data to prose to poetry. The data is the science and the rigor of the research we did. The prose are the statements that we put in. We saw how they fared in the marketplace, okay? And then, is it really poetry? Of course it's not. But what you'll see is language that is grounded in the reality of our reputation today and aspirational as well, so that we can evolve as an association. Okay, so we're focused on the essence, the positioning, and the pillars. And here they are. So the essence, what's our ideal reputation? We looked at many different scenarios. And when I say we, I mean the steering team. So board members, leadership management, and our team. And here's where we landed, okay? Preservation and transformation. And the research?
Okay, so the rationale behind that, so where this particular direction came from, was a mix of what we do that preserves the community as well as the membership value, but it's also what we need to do to continue to transform the community. So it's a mix of, okay, well, we currently provide in terms of a big strength, or large strength, high quality services and amenities. We help make Reston a better place to live. All of that is about preserving the community today. However, it's also keeping the community's best interest at heart from a growth and development standpoint. We need to get better at that. We need to offer unique services and amenities, innovative services and amenities. So that's part of that transformation piece. So yes, we're doing a good job in preservation, but we also need to figure out how do we continue to transform who we are and the community.
Okay, and here's a brand story we wrote to capture the essence of the positioning and the brand platform. And I'll read it to you. Proven innovation. We bring it home. Always grounded in purpose so we can elevate every experience. The Reston community is where our highest standards live. Both forward-looking and value-adding, we believe that if anything proves the power of our tomorrow, it's what we're doing today. Because today we're aligning every service and amenity with every need and want. Today we're increasing the value of homes and properties and of visitor and member satisfaction. And today we're keeping your best interest at heart so that tomorrow we're even more state of the art. So here's to being the association where what we could do becomes what we did. The association that continuously creates better amenities, services, and ways of living. And the association that's always at the forefront of our future, powering a potential that's exponential. Okay? Our brand positioning statement, remember the hierarchy of the different elements? Our positioning statement, what we want to stand for is being at the forefront of our community's future. Again, we brought in many different options that were all right based on the research. And we said, what's right for us? Okay, we had a set of evaluative criteria, and this is where we landed, at the forefront of our community's future. And now our set of brand pillars, okay? The first one, preservation driven. By helping make Reston a better place to live and continuously elevating its curb appeal, recreational offerings, and greener ways of operating, we preserve Reston's founding principles, home values, and the environment, while sustaining community pride. Preservation driven. The next one, community inspired. Our association is where far-reaching ideas become community realities. By championing the desires who live, work, and play here, we offer more than innovative amenities. We offer continuous inspiration. Community inspired. Value focused. A circle of value, that's what we create. By being easy to work with and incredibly responsive, we offer elevated experiences that are grounded in well-priced realities. We ensure every member and visitor not only gets value, but feels valued too. Value focused, okay? So that is the brand platform that has been ratified, okay? But it's only words on the screen if that's where we leave it. So it's critically important to bring it to life. And so let's look at how we brought this full brand hierarchy to life. And it's really about these blue boxes. Remember at the beginning we said your reputation is comprised of everything you say and everything you do. So no, a brand isn't a marketing campaign or an ad or a name or a logo. Those are all pieces of it. But it really is everything we say about ourselves. And when I say we, I mean it's our staff, it's our volunteers, it's our board. It's critical that everybody is on the same page and presents a positive face to the marketplace and speaks with one voice, okay? But it's also the experience others have with us. So remember some of those touch points. It's board sessions like this. It is if somebody gets a pool pass, if somebody's looking on your website for information, if they're going through a design review process, it's all those different touch points, the sum of all of those that comprise our reputation. Again, we can proactively manage what we say and what we do to earn the reputation we want to earn. Okay? So what we say about ourselves. We have crafted a voice of the brand, which is really core messaging that takes that data and pulls it into prose. Okay? And so this is a very small snapshot of the messaging that we created. And so we've got things like an elevator speech. We've got things like core principles of the brand. So anybody responsible for communicating, either verbally or in written form about the brand, is speaking with the same tonality and style and personality. So we want to speak in a voice that's proud. And here's how we do that. Here's how we don't do that. Okay? And so we've got some guidelines. We want to speak in a voice that's inspiring. And we clearly want to speak in a voice that's inclusive. Okay? And we've got a lot of messaging that we tested. And so this is directly from the research on the left column here. And these are things that are really important. This is part of the voice of the brand for residents and members. But we've got this also for lots of different groups as well. Because we want to stand for one thing, but if things are important to members, we want to bring them to the foreground when we're talking to them. And if we are speaking to folks who work here and we want them to use some of our amenities, we speak to them in a little bit different way. And now we know exactly how to do it. And we speak about it in a way, here's what we do so that here's the benefit you get. And so again, small snapshot of the messaging we created, okay? And we talked about it being not just what we say, but the experience others have with us. And so Jen's gonna take us through that.
So as part of creating that experience, we got insight basically from the research in terms of what amenities and services the members want today and in the future. However, we also took the overall data and the steering team and we spent quite a bit of time together ideating, saying what can we do? So we know there's an issue with being seen as easy to work with. What can we do to help close that gap? So we looked at the data, really got under the hood, put all of our ideas on the wall, and then we plotted all of them. And what this exercise allows us to do is understand what ideas or initiatives should we pursue. So it allows us to prioritize all of these ideas based on those ideas that will have the greatest impact with the fewest amount of resources. Like every organization, you don't have unending money. So we really needed to put a cap on, we've got all these great ideas, but how do we prioritize them? And we used the data and we used our conversations and this plotting method to understand the more resources it took, if it had a high impact, let's keep that in the running. Let's keep having those conversations. If it's high resources and isn't going to have an impact on the association, let's kick that idea out. We then looked on this side as well. We said, okay, it might be low resources, but if it has low impact, why fracture our resources? So we looked at all of these ideas and said, let's kick those out if we can't figure out how to make a more impact. And then we focused again on that upper left quadrant, which was, these are a low number of resources and we think they can have some great impact. What we do from here is we pulled all those ideas that fell in those top two quadrants. We met again and we said, okay, we've got to figure out what is realistic to move forward with and what isn't. So all of the ideas really folded into 5 different buckets, and I'll show you just a very high snapshot. But there was a bucket around facilities, so this was these were ideas, multiple ideas, around improving, repurposing, or building facilities to transform Reston. So again, think about our brand reputation we want to earn. Our people, focus on our people to inspire and educate them to own the customer experience. A lot of this was also a part of being easy to work with, right? Activities, identify the activities to generate non-assessment revenue, okay? Communications, evolve our communication channels to better educate customers on the value Reston Association delivers. And you'll notice we purposely use the word customers because it's not just members we're engaging with, it's the entire community, whether they're visitors, whether they're residents, non-members, et cetera. And then design review, explore ways to improve the design review to preserve and increase home values in Reston. So all of them fell into those buckets. From there, we have moved forward with certain ideas that we think are worth pursuing, the Brand Consultancy, the steering team, in terms of starting to really put together an action plan, what it will take to get from here to there. So these are some of those ideas. Within facilities, it's evaluating the facilities to build a recreation master plan. There's a champion identified and then a full support staff underneath. Pickleball as another facilities initiative. When we're focusing on people, we're talking about cross-training staff, developing and training employees on customer experience standards. So again, it's starting to close some of those gaps. In terms of activities, let's explore Reston Festival. And then let's program the parks. Let's figure out how do we program these great assets we have and potentially host even quarterly adult events. That was a very high interest idea in the survey itself. So again, all of this is starting to really figure out how do we get from here to there. And then finally on communications, website redesign, one, and then building a community app to go along with it to, again, make us easier to work with and find information and everything that a member and a non-member would want to know. Okay? That's at a very high level.
Okay, so lastly, what is next? And then we'd be happy to take your questions. So here's work that has been started to, again, bring the brand to life. So we need to engage the staff, the board, and the volunteers, all critical elements in this equation, so they understand the journey we're on, feel supported to deliver it, and ensure they do so. Yes, sir?
Who is we?
Reston Association Leadership Management.
Not you.
Not us. Nope. 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 The strategic roadmap, which Jen just showed you, had an initiative champion and had a supporting team on it. So those plans are being put in place, and timelines and metrics and things like that to actually operationalize the roadmap. The customer experience is being defined. What is that service standard that we all, and when I say we, I mean we, the staff, the volunteers, and the board, need to own to close some of those gaps and leverage some of the strengths in the member and customer experience. Then the brand needs to be launched to members. So here's what we did, here's what we heard from you, thank you very much. We couldn't have done it without you. Your insights were valuable, and here's what we did with it, and here's where we're going. We see that we're strong here, we see that we have opportunity here, you might want some new offerings and such, and so we really need to launch it to our members first, obviously, but then to those who work here, who play here, and who volunteer here as well. We want to drive engagement, satisfaction, new member acquisition, and non-assessment revenue. And then lastly, and really importantly, is to measure the success of all the initiatives and bring them to life and see where our reputation has moved and our satisfaction and our engagement. Okay? And that's what we have for you today. Hank, Mike, anything to add?
Nothing more on my end, Hank. No, I just would say that this has really helped. The staff has been very much engaged in this process. It has inspired them. They now feel they have a clear direction of where we need to go based on data, that's not just based on opinions. And so the team's very grateful to work with you all. I think you did an excellent job in gathering all this information, even though maybe some information we didn't necessarily want to hear. It's important that we hear it so that we know what we need to do and where we need to spend our time and focus. So I'll open it up for questions.
I have two questions. The first question is, were you able to establish the universe of total respondents relative to the people that responded?
Yes, to the best we can. So what we do is we look at who responds, and the closest that we can compare it to would be census. And so we looked at the census data and who responded and made sure they were closely matched. And if there were any egregious differences, we talked about, do we need to figure out how do we get more, or do we wait, is it small enough that we can weight the data appropriately
Okay,
to make sure it's
so
representative?
basically, what was that? Okay, what was that total number of potential respondents that yielded
Oh,
1,200?
oh gosh, how many email addresses? It's hard to tell because of the link from
Yeah,
Reston Now.
I will tell you from our databases alone, we pulled from both basically our member database, which we call RIA, which is our primary member database, and also from RecTrack, which is essentially anybody who has purchased pool passes, registered for programs and activities. That database alone has over 15,000 email addresses in it, and then our primary database probably had close to another, I think it was 10,000
Yeah, it might have been
email
more than
addresses
that.
in there. That was not including, as Jennifer mentioned, anything that may have came to us through the link that ran in Reston Now as well.
So 25,000 total emails.
Okay, what leads me to a census question to my second follow-up question. I was very much surprised at the statistic of 36% of the households had children under 18. Relative to all the new elementary school and high school and middle school construction, were you able to come to that would lead me to think that 10 years ago, there were only 20 or 25%. I'm sorry, I don't get that. Initially, I don't trust that statistic. Living here for 40 years and being engaged in the community for that much,
I mean, there is, short of a new census being conducted, so this was based on the 2010, was the only one I could compare it to, was 2010. So if a new, so short of a new census, there's no way for me to get closer to 40 or 50% or whatever it is. I can tell you that about 33 to 35% is average across every community in the US. So if you just look at the US, about 35% of adults 18 plus have kids under 18 at home. So it's very consistent with that. I can't speak to how much it's changed in this community. I don't think I would have access to the right data to be able to answer that, unfortunately.
All right, whatever. Now, as we give information and we empower our Reston Association to improve and transform our community, how does that dovetail with the county's plan to transform our community?
Good question.
We're not. Yes.
Oh.
Well, we have
I
our
can't.
plans, but they have their plans that I'm hearing about 50,000 more people they want to move. Well, what apartments going up? So how's that transforming and improving our community? Do we have you RA have any power of that at all?
Are you asking us, this survey asked how we would address the county? That was not the purpose of this survey. This survey was to get data on what our members want from us. Now, when it comes to addressing what is going on in the county, which a lot of us are upset about, and what the county lets go on and is allowed to go on in Reston, I think that's a board decision and a board discussion for a later time. And some of this data will support it, but this data was really designed around What is it our members want us to do?
In our ideal world.
Not an ideal world, this is a specific world of what they want us to do. This was Reston, and a really legitimate response rate. We asked Restonians what they want RA to do, and they've given us the information back. Now, when it comes to dealing with the county and development, that's a different issue, and that's something our board needs to discuss, but it was not the purpose of this survey.
But I'm concerned for other people here.
That's the purpose of this meeting.
Okay, well, just throwing it out.
Other questions?
I'd like to follow up on the first question that was asked about how representative the responses were of the community as a whole. I'm not sure that comparing with census can accurately answer that question. For example, let's say you're someone who uses the athletic facilities a lot, the paths, the tennis courts, the lakes. Maybe you're more enthusiastic about this survey when you received it, and you're more likely to respond. And so that might skew the results to be more representative of the people who are already using the facilities than of those who are not. So one way you might address that concern is to follow up with people who did not respond, to try to understand who are the people who didn't respond. Do they look the same as everyone else, or are they people who are not as engaged in using the facilities, or they have young kids, single mothers, and they don't have time, or what have you, and that may not be reflected in the census.
You know, you're absolutely, and that's a great question to ask. What we look at is, not everybody used every amenity. Not everybody used a single amenity. So we absolutely look for stuff like that. We look to see, is everybody uber satisfied across everything? Is everybody uber mad across everything? So we look for response bias, we look for scale bias, we look for all of that when we look at data. And all of that was rock solid. So those are great questions to ask and always good indicators of whether or not it's garbage in, garbage out when it comes to sample. Response bias is always a question, which is why, you know, you put things in place to be able to understand that. So, you know, everybody thinks if you're happy or you're angry, you're the only ones that respond to a survey. It's actually not rooted in that. It's a different mindset that drives survey taking, but I won't go into that detail, but those are good questions. And so we do look at that to make sure from all of the data we have. So census helps us demographically, which was the big question. But then from a statistics perspective, we look at the data as it comes in to make sure we're not getting weird scale bias or response bias.
Well, I appreciate you doing that, but some of the decisions that are going to be made seem to be based on very small differences in numbers. When you broke down the most important and the things to follow up on, you know, some of those were, let's say, 83%, and then the next category maybe was 76%. Now, it seems to me that that difference could be accounted for by these types of biases and who actually responds to the survey. So while you may think it's rock solid, unless you actually study who wasn't responding, unless you're certain of that, you may choose to pursue one goal thinking that it's at 83 and the other's at 75, when actually, if you looked at the whole community, maybe those numbers would be reversed. It's not like 20 versus 90%. On some of these numbers, we're very close. When you show the first couple of charts, starting from the most popular, I mean, that was pretty flat. Now, so if we get down into the quantitative differences here, I'm not certain that with the response rate and the lack of knowledge about who didn't respond, that you could really conclude that the order of priorities is what it appears to be. I do have an additional question, which is you showed at the end who the champions were of the various activities that you were going to follow up on. How will we learn, on that slide, how will we learn more about what follow-up you're doing? For example, with the community app, how are we going to track the progress of development of that community app or decisions that are made?
You're going to do that, and then I'll talk about the sample.
Sure, if you're looking at goals, which is what essentially you're talking about there, who's champion and what we're pursuing right now, those are all internal goals that are set for staff. Staff have to lead them to make them happen. And there's timelines set for all these goals and metrics associated with them. And they're in process. They will be in process. Some of them are already in process. We had a long conversation today about the website, for example, and what are the things we need to do with it. So putting those in a timeline, an operational management timeline is what we're doing, and staff are being assigned, staff will be measured and accounted for doing
So
those.
how would I know what that timeline is?
Well, the board knows what timeline is, and if you come to a board meeting, you'll hear about them because we'll be reporting to you on them. But we're not going to give you individual staff members' goals and share it with the community. But what we are doing is these tasks are being assigned to them, and are being held accountable by the CEO, and the CEO is being held accountable by the board.
I'd like to request that when you send out the newsletters, like you asked the survey, that you include updates about the status of those, and maybe say what the timeline is, that, okay, over the next year, we're developing an app, and, you know, we're gonna have a demo in 3 months,
Sure,
or
we'll
we've hired
do
so.
that, because transparency is also one of the keys here, and speaking positively is one of the keys here. So we're not speaking negatively here, this is a positive experience.
Right.
And you may not like the data that you saw, you may not like the results you saw.
I'm not talking about the data, I'm talking about the goals and the implementation. You say they're already in progress. I, as a dues-paying member, would like to be able to track that progress.
But we'll find a
So-
way to make sure that happens, if that's going through our news line, we will.
And I raised that issue partly because I sent an email asking about it, and I never got a response. So I would like a little more transparency on what is happening with those, even if it's just in a newsletter saying, here's our rough timeline. I think that would be only beneficial to the members. I don't see how it could be harmful to members to have that information.
We'll gladly do it.
Thank you.
And then in regards to the stats question, so a sample size of 1,200, your confidence interval at 95% confidence, you understand?
If those
that-
1,200 are
Of representatives,
randomly sampled,
exactly.
which
Yeah, and there's
my
no reason
concern is
to
they might
believe
not
it's
be.
not.
They're not
Where's that
randomly
randomly
sampled, that's the problem I have with it. 35,000 emails you had, you got responses for 1,200, and you're racing off, gonna do goals based on 1,200 non-random samples, which isn't
So-
legitimately statistical in my view of what I've ever heard about stats.
So from statistics, the analogy I always use is think if you're making a big pot of spaghetti sauce, and it's been boiling, it's been doing its thing, and you wanna test it, right? You stir it, you stir it, you stir it, you stir it, and you take a spoonful, and you test it. You don't eat the whole pot. So that percentage of responders is irrelevant, as long as the sample size is high and it's as representative as we can make it. So that's how to think about it. So it's 1,200, and people say it's 1,200 out of 30,000. That spoonful is meaningful. It's that 1,200 that makes it statistically relevant and reliable and all of that.
Can you let go of it, please?
And we probably should,
Okay, so the deal that I have is I've been here 44 years. I am really super involved, not only in Reston, but in the county. I go to transportation meetings and housing meetings and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That man over there, sitting at the end of that road, Doug Britt, got the biophilic designation for Reston. And a slide came up there that that's not important. By the way, the globe is on fire, and our climate is changing, and all of this is relatively minor. We need to be paying attention to that. That's our priority. Affordable housing is a priority. Reston Association is a homeowners, it's not a business, and we're gonna find more things to do to bring in more, and I didn't hear anything about the cost of keeping our amenities that we have in order, in good order. That, we have no clue. Our reserve studies that Reston Association responsibly have done through time are obsolete because the changes in concrete, steel, timbers, gravel, it's all going off the charts. So our community, we're trying to keep it diverse, economically, et cetera. so that people, a variety of people can live here. That's what Reston is. So you took 1,200 volunteers who wanted to answer questions, and you're making huge global judgments about it, but are you considering these other things? And I'm worried sick that staff who are working their buns off now are gonna have other goals, and the membership hasn't even approved this. We have had nothing to do with this. 8 board members and staff have decided this stuff, but the membership hasn't had anything to say about it. So yes, you do your job, you're used to a variety of clients, but this is our HOA. We're not a business, we're not necessarily interested in, you know, more expense to bring in more income. We might be, but I don't know. Based on the goal that we have in our charter to keep our amenities well kept and our properties well kept, and we bought in Reston because we have covenants. If you don't like covenants, don't live in
And that's
Reston.
all still really important to
I
all
get
the
that,
members.
But I was just struck
Yeah.
by there was no, as somebody else said, 90-20. It was, you know, whatever it was down to maybe 50%. Holy moly. I spent 44 years building up Reston Association to people who don't understand it, aren't informed, and are furious that they have to keep their places up. So I'm really sorry, but I'm really concerned. Is this gonna be online so we can look at it? And the website, holy moly, I don't even wanna start that. I'll freak out. I can't find anything on that thing.
I very much respect your perspective, everybody in the room.
And there are 20 of us here. I mean,
I respect all of your
of a
perspectives.
community of 60,000, you have 20 of us here, half of whom are staff and board.
My recommendation would be to look at it this way. I think the way Hank started the meeting was he said, we had anecdotal information about what our members wanted, their satisfaction, what we were doing well, and what we didn't. So we feel very confident that the 1,200 responses we got are statistically reliable. We've been doing this for 31 years, and I can't make you believe that, but we believe that, and our credibility says it's completely stable and it's really solid data. And it is 1,200 perspectives that we didn't have before we started this process. So would it have been nice to have 35,000? Sure would have. And we gave everybody the opportunity to respond. We can't make them respond. The association can't make them respond. We didn't want to incentivize them to respond because then you do get biased. They're doing it for the $10 gift card or whatever it is. So the way I recommend we look at it is this is 1,200 perspectives from a cross-section of our member base that we did not have before. Is it perfect? No, it is not. It will never be. Is it really good compared to not having that information at all? Absolutely it is. And so the decisions were not made by this is 83%, this is 85, let's pick 85. It was not made that way. It was exhaustive conversation with the leadership and the management of the association, with board members to say, now that we know what matters most, what are we gonna do with this information? We're not just gonna take the top ones and run, right? Maybe that's not feasible to execute. Maybe we don't have the resources to do that, right? So we didn't even pick all of the top things, right? It was all data and insights that the association did not have prior to this engagement. And so the decisions are infinitely more well-informed than they were with a vocal minority of folks talking here and there and with anecdotal information. So that's my recommendation for how I would look at it, as opposed to saying, I wish it was more. Let's be thankful for the 1,200 insights we have. Other questions?
Toward the end of the presentation, you had the quadrant about the high impact, low resource activities. When are we going to get to see what the letter A stood for, or the letter O or double A? And what were the criteria to determine what's high impact and what's low resource?
So, Hank, are we, maybe put out a high-level summary
We're
of
gonna
the
be putting out a
information?
summary of this, and it'll go out on the website. The board has to see it first, and, they have to approve it. So,
We all paid for it.
We all paid.
so you will get a summary of it. It'll be done online, and you'll see it on the website.
All right, follow,
Quick question. Can
Follow,
all
please.
report- oh, sorry.
also, you interviewed 8 of the board members. How come the 9th board member was not interviewed?
He chose not to.
That person chose not to, we offered.
Okay, that tells me a lot. Okay.
Quick question. Why won't it be a summary? Could it be an entire report that you'll be putting out?
Some of the material we believe is sensitive to our business plan, and so we have to keep that in line, because as the question came up, what are our competitors? Some of this information out there, other companies could use that might be valuable for us. So we're gonna give you the plan. We're not gonna do anything that we think is sensitive to our business, our strategy and our business going forward.
Just as an example, I'm not too familiar with this sort of stuff, but what would be something that would be
Like an
business
activity, a
confidential?
program, something like that another company could take and say, well, they just did the research, they trust the research, and would take a program that we would like to offer at some time in the future.
And this is probably a stupid question, but why would we care? As a
Well,
homeowner
one of the reasons we
association.
would care is because we've been instructed, at least I've been instructed, to keep assessments low and to look for other ways to generate revenue. And some of the things that we're being careful about would be things that would generate additional revenue that others could indeed take from us and implement before we had the chance to implement them. And a lot of it comes off this research that specifically spells out what people said they wanted to see us start doing. I think that the interesting thing that I found that when I first got here that was very interesting, and I think Larry shared it with me, is the last new amenity Reston Association put in place was 29 years ago. And if you talk about who's our competition, right in town center, all these new developments that are going up are putting in their own swimming pools and exercise centers.
Good.
That's fine, except if you wanted them to be a part of Reston Association, because they're using our stuff anyways. So if you want these groups to be part of us and start paying an assessment, we need to make sure we're giving them some sort of value to encourage it. For example, they're walking our trails. They may even be playing on our tennis courts.
They're certainly using our lakes.
They're certainly using our lakes. So they're getting it for free.
Yeah.
So we need to be really careful, and we need to, we're not a business, but we kind of have to act like a business. I mean, we're a small business. Round numbers, we're a $20 million small business. And we have things we have to take care of. We have competitors who, as I said, they're putting in swimming pools, building houses, and they're totally out of our control. The county's allowed it to happen, not Reston Association. And so we're trying to make sure that we put in place the things that increase the home values, make sure that we have, with the board and programs that we put in place, that we can fight what the county's trying to do. Because, you don't have to be a blind person not to try to cross the streets and see what's going on here. So that's where we're going.
I have gone over this pool thing and fitness thing. I'm on the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee. And I have asked that same question, Hank, and I'm surprised you don't know this because Larry goes to almost every meeting. Every single community in the TSA is putting in pools. Most of them have fitness centers. A lot of them have concierges. Why? They are almost all luxury dwelling units, and they can't rent their stuff without that on site. So that's ridiculous. You're not going to get people coming to Reston pools. You might get some tennis players because they don't have tennis courts. But I went over there because I was alerted to that, I don't know, several years ago. Why is this, why are they having pools? And they told me straight up. They can't rent if they don't have a pool. So I don't know how many more amenities If you have an amenity in perpetuity, it's maintenance of that amenity that you're buying into. At some point, you limit that, so your liability for upkeep
Yes.
is limited.
Now, one of the things that we need to decide is what amenities we're gonna keep. Do we need 15 pools? Do we need all the tennis courts we have? We just saw the data we got said, we were all talking about, I think that there was a plan to build an enclosed tennis facility. I think 6 years ago it was gonna cost $4 or $5 million. Today it would be twice that much, but it's not higher priority in the data we've received. But we did receive information that said people would want a wellness center. People live in this community, live in Reston, rated a wellness center, which would be exercise wellness. If you read the details of it, it's very similar to what the people are buying in these luxury apartments. So we need information to decide what amenities we want to keep, what we want to maintain, and what new ones that people that are moving into this community. I think the other interesting fact here, the other interesting data point I thought was really incredible, is that about a quarter of the people have lived here for 20 years or more, about a quarter of the people have lived here for 5 years or less. So there is an obvious dichotomy going on here. And there's a lot of people that, very interested in cutting down on traffic, as we are, very interested in controlling development, as we are. There's also a new segment that's moving in here that wants to buy these homes, because people retire and move on. They want to buy these homes, they want to live in this community, and they want us to have the right number of swimming pools, they want us to have the right number of other amenities, and there are things that we didn't even thought of 30 years ago. Which, remember, that's the last year we had a new amenity, 30 years ago. We have never even thought about that they're telling us they want. There's a lot of really important, valuable, actionable information on here, whether you believe the sample size is large enough or not. I did statistics. I've been told that if you got 300 people who responded to a 20,000 population, you got the right sample size. We got 4 times that. So you can question the sample size all you want, and you can question and cherry pick the data that you want, but it's not perfect. No statistics ever are. But we've got information we never had before. And you may not like some of the things that's said up here. And it wasn't saying that being a biophilic city wasn't important. It didn't say that we weren't going to stop focusing on that. It said on the list of other things that they wanted, there were other things they thought we should be focusing on that we're currently not focused on. So there's a little misinterpretation of that information. It's a little misinterpretation of, do we want to be environmentally focused? We do. We want to be environmentally focused. We are talking about how do we add more trees to our community and other things like that. But the people that this survey looked at, and the new people that are moving in, the ones that have only been here 10 years or less, that have small kids, or maybe don't have kids at all, are looking for totally different amenities that we don't have. And they're looking for the sort that are in the town center, which we have not even thought about putting in place. So the question for the board and for us comes, do we put in a $6 to $7 million enclosed tennis center? Or do we put in something else that they said we should think about?
Okay, so about that tennis center, during the 5-hour capital improvement program lecture for the county that I attended, a rec person from the Fairfax County Rec Authority got up, and I swear I almost fell off the chair, said Reston was getting indoor tennis. I knew it wasn't us, but keep that in your pocket. And,
No, we've been informed about all that.
Let me speak as the board rep here. First of all, anything that the staff comes that is of any kind of expenditure goes through the fiscal committee, it goes through purchasing. I mean, they can't just go out and willy-nilly because they want to blow up a bomb. Oops, I didn't realize that was there, sorry. So I think that a lot of these proposals will come to the board at some point in time. But you've got 6 of us here tonight. This is the first time we've heard this also. We have to digest it.
Yeah,
but
that's why I want to see it.
But I don't think you can. We're not just going to go crazy and spend $6 million on an indoor tennis court. When I saw that no, I'm just saying that little chart says, it's kind of there, kind of not there. What we have to be concerned when we're talking about competitors is what is the Reston Community Center going to do? I mean, they're going to be over at Reston Town Center North. Well, we have members at Reston Town Center North when it gets built. So it's a balancing act,
Wait a minute.
when we have to play nice with them.
The Fairfax County Park Authority will be at Reston, not RCC. It's not
Yeah,
gonna be
but-
there.
They will be paying
Then,
RCC.
yeah, they'll be paying
Yes,
RCC fees.
exactly.
Park Authority will be managing, I'm
And Bill Bowie
misspoke.
has said no indoor tennis in that right.
But I'm just
I
saying, you know,
know
that they are RA members, so we will need to be careful about what do we do with our amenities here so that we can attract them to come over to use our stuff. But I don't think you can think that, and I don't want any member to leave here to think that it's not gonna have to go through the board for any kind of thing that we saw up there that is gonna cost money.
And by the way, I'm not questioning 1,200 as not being a good number. I'm questioning the 1,200 who were volunteers. You know, that's already, when you look at that statistical salary and age, that's a lot of very well-placed people. That doesn't look at the people who are struggling to stay here. And that's, I think, some of our concerns is, we want this community to thrive for everybody. And how much can we take on extra? And why isn't RCC doing the programs and the adventures and the camps? And Reston Association paying more attention to upkeeping our community, which is really what the purpose of an HOA is. Because RCC is drawing back on what they're doing. We pay 4.7 cents extra for RCC.
Just to echo what was said, I also was not questioning the sample size, but the sample randomness. They're two different issues. I think the sample size is fine, and you tried to address the sample randomness by comparing the respondents with census data, which is good, but I'm not convinced it's sufficient. The example I gave is someone who, because he is a more active user of the facilities, is more enthusiastic about responding. That isn't going to be captured in census data. It's not a question of his age or income level, et cetera. And I'm not saying the results are not representative. The question is, are they? It's a question. And what more might be done to give confidence that they are, or perhaps to, if they aren't, to discover that before making decisions based on the respondents liking one thing 84% of the time, but maybe the whole community would feel differently, less or more. So again, it's not the sample size, but the sample randomness that is the issue.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to break up here. We said we'd go to 8:30, and it's just on everybody's time. We're just about there. But just to answer that, I think that we all who've taken statistics realize that, you know, the randomness of a survey can add or subtract several percentage points. So if we have something that said 90% of the people said this was important, and say they're off by 6 percentage points, that's still saying that 84% of the people said this is important. And that's where we're focused right now. We're focused on the high level of things here. And again, we looked at the what was perceived as the high impact, low cost piece that started initiating in 2020. That's what we're doing. Things that we all know we want, an app. You know, everybody wants to be able to use their cell phone to deal with us in here. So we're looking at things like that. We will keep you all informed about where we're going. The board obviously is going to have a discussion about this at the next board meeting later on this month. We were going to put out the survey online so that you can see and get this information and discuss it among yourselves. And anything that we initiate, you know, through our communications department, we will continue to put out. But maybe we can take one more question, a short one, and then we're going to have to break up. Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, I have a challenge for the board.
Yes, sir.
Two challenges for the board. Number one, because we are an HOA and there is basically, Reston is not going to grow. It's 76 or 78 acres. How should the focus of Reston's activity, Reston Association's activities be primarily focused internal to Reston or be outward looking? And I think this is.
Say that last part again, Bob.
Whether it should be internally focused or whether as you look for new income or revenue, whether it should be externally focused. Because I know the challenge is, because I have friends who do it, they come and they use our facilities at no cost to themselves. And I don't know how, I have a hard time dealing with it. And the second thing is, and it's happening right now, since 2014, the number of apartments in Reston has doubled. And it's going to increase exponentially. The number of single-family dwellings and townhouses is almost going to be flat. And how those people use the facilities and amenities of Reston is completely different than a homeowner. Homeowners got to worry about it. The point about covenants, an apartment dweller could care less about covenants. They don't have to worry about that. They live in an apartment. But if I want to put up a fence or I want to cut down a tree, that becomes a covenant issue. And the attitude that I have, I'm not surprised that people don't like covenants, but I see much less compliance with the covenants now, particularly as it relates to removing trees, because they're going.
So there's nothing we can do about what goes on in the TSA, but I challenge you to think about the 50-year-old condo associations, garden apartment condo associations, and we see them. Julie and I have been DRB reps. They do have to come every time they have a tree that's over 4-inch caliber that's dying and they want it taken down, or they want to change their signage, or they want to change the windows. So the rental apartments are also older. They're also going to have to start coming to DRB. Which one of those are going to come down?
Right.
For redevelopment.
Well,
But they do.
It's not
as intense as a single-family homeowner.
Right, and
But they are
my point is the real dynamic of Reston is going to change, and it's already begun to change, and it's going to change, and it's going to change much faster than it could be conceivable, because for a couple of reasons. People want to live here. There are the existing amenities are that good. And a large portion of people are really priced out of buying homes, so they have to rent. So, and we could go on and on and on.
We do need to
I
honor
know,
people's
it's a
time.
question for them, and
Yes.
it's kind of related to what Bob said. When you got the data of how many were here, say 1 to 5 years, and their age was younger, is there any way to correlate whether or not those people were homeowners? Did they live in apartments? Do we have that?
Yes, I
Kind
don't
of
know it off
drill
the top of my
down, so
head,
we do.
but absolutely.
Okay, because I think that would be interesting to know about those who are.
We can certainly share that with them.
And every slide here we can access online, Hank?
You will be able to access most of the slides online, except the ones we deem as business sensitive, because we don't want people stealing our ideas. Most of the ones you saw here are not a problem.
And you're putting the blank survey on the website?
Excuse me?
The blank survey itself, that people answered, is that gonna be the questions asked?
The question they
So
asked,
people that didn't answer
The actual survey instrument that we used.
Yeah.
That was used.
I shared it on Facebook a couple of times.
I,
I did too.
we typically
Anyone
don't
who
do
wants
that.
to go do it or do it.
Let's let us talk about it and see what we can figure out. But folks, thank you so very much for coming in on a cold day in December. And
Thank you,
Diane,
everybody.
Yes.
thank you guys very much. I really appreciate the work they've done. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all relative.
Well, let's,
Well, no, this.